starting off with the recap of what most people, I think, including me, thought was going to be the game of the year in Tuscaloosa with Auburn traveling uh, to play at Alabama, and I think the game was pretty much lived up to the hype for the most part. I think I would have been nicer to see a little bit of a closer game, wire to wire. I know Auburn got out to the big lead. Alabama kind of started surge back, made it close for a little bit, and then Auburn was ultimately able to pull away at the end. But I'll throw it over to you first, Josh. Just any immediate takeaways you had after that game.
I think it still was perhaps the game of the year. I remember I watched almost the entirety of it. Yeah, Auburn never trailed. They only tied twice, and both moments were still very electric. I think the game was wire to wire, which I think still made it a good game. But when you really want to talk about it, it was Auburn jumping to that like 14-3 lead
Right.
that really put the game on ice. And I think while Alabama made it close at times, they could never break through, and their defense just shrugged, which I think was the biggest problem because there were great opportunities. Broom was a little iffy. The Hot Pettiford was kicked out of the game, like fouled out, I think, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
Like they were obvious weaknesses that Alabama missed on. They shot horribly from three, and for the first time in Nate Oates' career, they never led in a game at all, which
Wow.
is
I didn't know that.
at least
Wow.
at Tuscaloosa. I know apparently Nate Oates has never had a game where they did not have the lead at any point in the game in Tuscaloosa in his entire
Yeah.
career, which
I mean,
says a lot about Oates, but even then, it says a lot more about Auburn. Auburn is by far the only team that can be the number one seed at the moment. I don't think this changes unless Auburn literally loses out, which doesn't appear to be the case in the slightest given how they've been. Yeah, they have to go play Auburn or Alabama again, but this time it's going to be in the jungle, which is a far harder environment to fight in than you'll ever get at Alabama. No offense to Bama, though. Their schedule is horrific. They lost also in Missouri, but they bounced back against Kentucky. If they can channel that energy together and that momentum, they can make a push. They can beat Auburn again, but it's Auburn's world. Really, that's how it is.
yeah. And I really do hope the college game day crew over at ESPN decides to have another game day for that Auburn Alabama matchup in the jungle. I mean, that was just a perfect build up for a game of that caliber, just having the game day crew there. I understand Tuscaloosa hasn't always brought the best basketball crowds being a football school, but I mean, you can make the argument now that they're more of a basketball school than football. But I mean, of course, winning fixes everything. Just with what Nate Oates has done in the last few years at Alabama and Tuscaloosa, just he's completely changed, I think, the national perspective about that basketball program, and just the huge household names playing at the game. Janai Broom, Mark Sears. Just I think it was the perfect storm to have. What again? Yeah, like you mentioned, was a really good game. Even if Alabama, it maybe Auburn, jumping out to that 14-3 run. I think you mentioned kind of took away from some of the dramaticness that I think the game could have had. I was a little pissed off because I really did want to watch the entirety of that game, start to finish. But I was hoping UConn could have got out of Newark with an easy win against Seton Hall, but nope, they had to go to overtime and ended in a UConn loss. So I ended up having to catch the late. I ended up catching the game late in the first half through the rest of the game. But I definitely do want to say
The second half was just a better
yeah,
product.
second half was definitely a great watch. I definitely think. I mean, it was really cool seeing Mark Sears come down and bang two threes back to back to tie the game. I was just, I mean, the Mark Sears. I called Mark Sears having a big game. I thought that was going to be enough to get Alabama over the hump against Auburn in that game. Obviously, it wasn't. But I do think in those two losses, the Auburn loss and the Missouri loss, Mark Sears kind of reminded people that he's still Mark Sears. He's still able to go out and score 30 plus on any given night and show. I mean, he is one of the premier guards players in the country, and that's someone who I think I trust more than any other player going into March in the country. But I think what I was able to take away the most in terms of player wise out of Auburn or Alabama was not only Mark Sears but Todd Pettiford. I understand it was only 13 points. It wasn't anything like insane, but the shots he took were not easy shots when the game started to get close in the second half, when Alabama was kind of going on that run to tie the game. I mean, just the confidence he plays with. He's shown up in every big game that Auburn has played this year. And that kid's, I mean, he doesn't even, he'd probably start on almost any other program in the country. And for him to come off the bench and just do what he does for Auburn, just the incredible shot making ability, and just he plays with no fear, and that kid's going to be a lottery pick. Um, but I kind of wanted to ask you, Josh, do you think, I know it's tough because it's several days after, but how do you, it's more than a week after, my mistake, but do you, just looking at that game alone, do you take more positive from Auburn or more negative from Alabama out of what you saw?
I think it's a hard mixture of both. I mean, Auburn didn't even play the best game that they could have
Right,
played, which I think says so much about what we are capable of seeing with Auburn. Um, but I think it's more or less on Alabama. Once again, the 3-point shooting that the team is known for having fell off drastically. That could just be because Auburn was also a good defensive team when it comes to the 3-point line, but Bama doesn't shoot that bad typically. I also do think that Mark Sears is very much a wild card. Like we've seen him get benched in lesser games than this, and he was
right,
benched at small points when I don't think he should have been, at least in my opinion. But given how he's been playing this year, it's been very up and down. He has a great upside. He could be the next Jalen Brunson. I know everyone's comparing
right.
him
Yeah,
to Jalen. I think there's a great comparison. He does remind me a lot of his game as a guy who watches the Knicks a ton. Um, I would definitely agree with that. I'm just saying that it would probably be more of Alabama's negatives than Auburn's positives. But that being said, I don't think it's impossible for Bama to beat Auburn. I just feel like it's not going to happen unless we really get a mix. We get the perfect mixture of a bad game for Auburn and a good game for Bama. Because if both teams play well, Auburn's winning. Both teams play
right.
like they played last time. You're not going to get an Auburn loss in that one either. I just feel like it's very hard for Auburn to lose games, even when they're playing bad, which says a lot. Once again, they're a team that you don't catch losing. You don't catch losing unless they're going down early or unless they're missing like a Johnny Broom or the Todd Pettiford performance, which is very hard to get nowadays. So
Right.
it's it's a mixture, but it's more on Bama than Auburn, I feel.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. Like you mentioned, Janai Broome didn't play the greatest game, at least shooting from the field. I definitely think that I don't sulk on that loss if I'm an Alabama fan, if I'm Nate Oates or any of the Bama players too much. Auburn is the best team in the country. They had a great opportunity to win that game. Just I mean being at home and just the whole build up and everything and more the performance Mark Sears had. I think the Missouri loss as well. Just that was a trap game. I know me and you both talked about that when we saw that game coming up last week. And I think it's tough to they're probably tired again after playing Auburn and just to go into Missouri, which is proven to be a pretty tough place to play this year. Um, but I mean, they just have such a gauntlet of a schedule to finish the year. I mean, you could make the argument they've had the hardest schedule in college basketball history this
I
year.
would say so at least. I mean, these
Yeah, I
these
mean, it's up
last
there.
7 games are all ranked. Auburn is featured twice. Florida is there. Kentucky is there. Tennessee is there. They're playing just the worst at the worst time.
Right,
They're playing the most important games. They're going to be, and I mean, I think it's even more to talk about the fact that they're probably going to play a ranked team or two in the SEC tournament right away. I mean, they
right.
arguably could be playing 10 plus ranked teams in a row. So if they make it through this gauntlet with like minimum 3 losses, that's amazing. That might be
Yeah,
the biggest success story we'll we'll ignore. Honestly, I think until they run it back and make the Final Four again, and we're wondering why did they do that? Oh, because they were given the hardest schedule known to man,
right.
and they got through with it.
I mean, yeah, like you just mentioned, they might lose a few of these games coming up in just the gauntlet of a schedule they have to finish the year in conference play. And again, in the SEC tournament, that's again going to be another bloodbath. But I think while they might pick up some losses, their seed might go down a little bit. I mean, these games are preparing them for March, and in the tournament, they're not going to be playing right away the caliber of teams that they're playing right now in the SEC to finish off the year, and in the that they're going to face in the SEC tournament. And just with the amount of experience that they brought back from last year's Final Four team, and even last year, there was stretches of the year where Alabama couldn't hit a shot, and when they're hot, they looked so good. We saw them in the tournament last year. Um, that final score in the semifinal game against UConn. That final score was not a great showing of how competitive that game was. They gave UConn the best fight probably out of any team in the tournament last year. And I just like again, I trust Mark Sears more than any other player going into the tournament. I think Nate Oates' offense is built for when they're hot, they're so tough to beat. I just think it really falls on the role players that need to step it up a lot more, specifically like Grant Nelson. I think a lot of people, including myself, were expecting a little bit more of a jump in his play from last year this year, just because I think you kind of give last year a pass just because he was playing up at the high major level for the first time. I think I expect a lot more out of him this year. He's had moments, but he needs to be better. And they need Cliff Amore too. I know you bring him in for rim protection. He does that, but I thought in a Nate Oates offense, he'd be able to do a little bit more on the offensive side. But I mean, you need guys to back up Sears when he's able to just light it up.
Definitely. I think I will say there is great backup when there needs to be. I think Aiden Holloway can fill that role.
Yeah, definitely.
Mo Diabate, I think Mo Diabate played so well in that game for reference. I think he was very underrated, and he still is very underrated. He can fill in for Mark Sears when the offense isn't going anywhere. But the problem is that the way that Alabama wins games, and they've done this for the longest time now, is they just run through you. They just keep scoring and scoring and scoring, but they don't have a defense. And it showed.
Right.
They had 110 points put against them against Missouri. They had 90 points put against them against Auburn. And I get it, the defense is something that they're never really going to get done. It's probably too late to really get the defense under control, but it's the offense that they need to tone down on. If they can get the offense to a point where it's consistently 90 plus points a game, even more than that, maybe 100 points a game. If they can be in that scenario, they're impossible to stop because you just can't outscore a team that scores the way that Alabama does. And maybe that's the secret key that Oates has been trying to unlock for the past few weeks now. He's had moments, they've worked well, they were really in a good spot, and they have been in a good spot for quite some time now. It's just that I don't see Auburn being like in a scenario of losing to Bama for reference because of offense. I just think that unless Alabama is consistent and they show consistency in these last few games and in the tournament, the SEC tournament, then I don't know. I mean, the upside's still there, still a Final Four, still a national championship upside with this team,
Right.
but they're losing it. They're losing it, and they need to stay focused on the offense in particular. If they can make the defense better, then yeah, that would be pretty useful. Don't get me wrong, but they can't have any more games like this. They can't have any more games like Missouri. They have to manage to outrun the other team, and they have to do it so well that it doesn't matter what the team is. They just do it.
Right.
That's really how I can put it as.
I think for Alabama to make it back to the Final Four, they have to play their A game. I don't think anything less is going to be enough for them to get back to that point. They haven't done it as of late, but I think come March, the schedule that they have is going to prepare them for it, and I think they will. I think they'll play their A game in March, and I still think they make it back to the Final Four. I'm kind of torn a little bit on it still, but I'm sticking with Alabama making it back to the Final Four.
I might have them temporarily off. I just have to see how they finish the season.
Right.
I mean, if they grab a 1 seed, maybe I'm in that scenario. They're probably at a 2 seed right now, given the hectic schedule that they're given. But I think that's the best 2 seed we're going to see for a decade. For all I know, that's a 1 seed in almost every other year, but this year. But I don't see another reason to not believe in them. But
yeah,
it's the offense. But